Qatar is many things. It is immensely wealthy. It hosted the last Men's World Cup. If you've ever watched the news on Al Jazeera, they're based in Qatar. But for the United States, this tiny country is also a key that opens many doors. Let's say you wanted to wage war in the Middle East. You are within striking distance of Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. From here, you could also coordinate a defense of Israel. There's also this, the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point for millions of barrels of oil per day, or somewhere around a fifth of the oil the world uses. And zoom right into the country's core, you'll find U.S. Central Command, their forward headquarters, among the most important of their military bases, not just in the Middle East, but in the entire world. For America's enemies, Qatar is both a dangerous launch pad and a powerful deterrent. And the United States has just made a promise signed by Donald Trump that allows it to go to war if Qatar is ever attacked by anyone.
Signing an executive order, Trump says any armed attack on Qatar will be considered a threat to the peace and security of the U.S.
Let me explain why and what this new arrangement actually looks like.
So this is a big day, a beautiful day, potentially one of the great days ever in civilization.
When Donald Trump this week announced a framework for a peace deal with Israel that would force the surrender of Hamas in Gaza, what the world would only find out 2 days later was that the U.S. president was also signing another deal, binding U.S. security interests with another Middle Eastern country, assuring the security of the state of Qatar. It's an executive order, a commitment from the White House that promises to protect Qatar in roughly the same way that NATO countries vow to protect each other if any member is ever attacked. And I can show you right down to the letter what that looks like. In Trump's executive order, the United States shall regard any armed attack on Qatar as a threat to the peace and security of the United States. NATO language is quite similar. The parties agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all. That's the famous "an attack on one is an attack on all" philosophy. Then, in Qatar's case, in the event of such an attack, the United States shall take all lawful and appropriate measures, including diplomatic, economic, and, if necessary, military actions. This again mirrors NATO language, where it's written, if such an armed attack occurs, then each member must take such action as it deems necessary, including the use of armed force. Now, a couple things to point out. First, that for the order to have any force, Qatar has to be physically attacked. That's the line that has to be crossed. But even if it is, the U.S. isn't forced to fight back. That qualifier of taking military measures, if necessary, is a crucial technicality here.
That means there's broad discretion for the United States to decide whether or not there's a security threat that necessitates using military means.
And there's another important limitation to this commitment Trump has made, and that's the fact of having done it by executive order, which is the legislative equivalent of making a pinky promise. Military treaties, like the U.S. being a part of NATO, for example, normally go through Congress. They require a vote in the U.S. Senate to become statutory law, i.e. something more durable and therefore more credible than what Trump has just declared, which any future president or even Trump himself could make disappear as easily as it appeared in the first place.
It's entirely reversible. There's no treaty here. There's no Senate ratification here. This is just sort of a statement by the president that he feels that the United States should have this commitment to Qatar. Trump himself could issue a new executive order tomorrow saying, hey, let's not defend Qatar.
So take the new position of the Trump White House for what it is, but against which threat exactly? Well, you can see Qatar as being the hub of an entire nervous system of relationships in the Middle East, where historically it has avoided taking sides, which means sometimes finding itself the friend of the enemies of its friends.
Qatar itself backs many of the different Islamist groups and opposition groups that were part of the Arab uprisings of 2011. It's had a very quiet behind-the-scenes relationship with Israel. What they would say is they're trying to operate somewhat like the Switzerland of the Middle East. They're trying to remain as neutral as possible, have as many relationships as possible with Israel, with Tehran.
So how to answer the question of who would attack Qatar, except maybe by explaining who has attacked Qatar. This will also show you what a strange position they're in, because from the U.S. point of view, Qatar has been attacked by both a treasured ally and a sworn enemy.
Israeli officials have confirmed that Iran fired 6 missiles on the U.S. base in Qatar.
Iranian state media calling this operation, quote, blessings of victory.
Iran and the U.S. are deeply adversarial. They have no formal diplomatic relations, and they actually just hate each other.
They crossed a very big red line by attacking nuclear facilities. I don't know how much room is left for diplomacy.
My position is very simple. The world's #1 sponsor of terror can never be allowed to possess the most dangerous weapon.
They are frequently on opposite sides of conflict in the Middle East. Iran often acting through proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and the US not just fighting them back, but also striking at Iran itself.
The US military says it's bombed 3 of Iran's key nuclear sites, Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan.
And it is exactly in retaliation for that attack on Iran's nuclear program that Iran struck back at the US through Qatar.
This Iranian attack on the U.S. airbase in Qatar is the latest escalation in the 11-day-old war between Israel and Iran.
If the U.S. didn't have a base in Qatar, it's very difficult for me to imagine that Iran would have any interest in attacking Qatar at all.
So Iran is one possible threat the U.S. may either want to retaliate against or deter in this new security arrangement with Qatar. But the most recent attack on Qatari soil by another country was from another nation the U.S. has sworn to defend.
Israel launching a strike on Hamas leadership in Qatar.
Israel confirmed it had struck inside Qatar itself, targeting senior Hamas leadership.
Israel, of course, counts the U.S. among its closest and most powerful friends, which is why it came as such a surprise when it carried out an airstrike, it says, against Hamas leaders, but who were in Qatar's capital at the time, discussing a ceasefire proposal for Gaza. This attack was widely seen as a failure.
Tactically, Israel was trying to kill Hamas leaders in a targeted assassination attempt. They failed to do that, but they also killed a Qatari security official, which made the Qataris particularly angry. So tactically, not a smashing success.
The U.S. was reportedly infuriated. Qatar, until this point, had been a key mediating influence between Israel and Hamas, hosting talks, exploring pathways to peace, and it forced the U.S. into an awkward attempt to show both allies they had its support. Among other things, this put pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to say he was sorry and effectively promise he wouldn't do it again.
I said to the Prime Minister of Qatar, Israel was targeting terrorists. Wasn't targeting Qatar. And of course, we regretted the loss of the Qatari citizen. It wasn't our target.
There's an effort to save face, to reinforce U.S. ties to Qatar, to suggest to the Qataris that the U.S. won't let this happen again. I think that he's trying to communicate quite strongly to the Israelis, hey, lay off Qatar. Don't attack Hamas in Qatar, or don't attack Qatar for any reason. It makes us look bad.
Trump's own view of Qatar has changed dramatically over a relatively short period of time. During his first term,
the nation of Qatar, unfortunately, has historically been a funder of terrorism at a very high level.
That was at a time when several of Qatar's neighbors cut ties with it, accusing it of backing extremist groups, Hamas among them. But the U.S. has always had to walk a very fine line. I showed you Al Udeid Air Base at the start. There are some 10,000 U.S. soldiers there. It is essential for operations across the entire Middle East and in a region that Trump may see as requiring much more stability than there is now.
What Trump is trying to do essentially is to rein a number of these different forces in, to keep them in America's orbit, to say that though the U.S. is America first and we're going to take care of our own considerations, we still are concerned with our relationships with you and your own security, and we're willing to help.
And from nearly the very start of Trump's second term, he's made Qatar a priority. One of just a small handful of Arab countries he made a point of visiting earlier this year.
I will never hesitate to wield American power if it's necessary to defend the United States of America or our partners. And this is one of our great partners right here.
Also this year, the Trump Organization would also see an economic reason to invest in Qatar, announcing plans for a Trump-branded golf resort. Qatar would also give Trump a $400 million gift, a luxury jetliner that the Pentagon is refurbishing to be used as Trump's new and improved Air Force One.
This raises serious ethical concerns about foreign influence. How can I count the many conflicts of interest and national security risks around this?
I should say, as Trump's relationship with Qatar appeared to warm, Republicans were far from united on whether Qatar was a nation worth defending with American blood and steel.
Qatar's not, in my opinion, a great ally. I mean, they support Hamas, and so what I'm worried about is the safety of the President of the United States.
Everybody needs to know that Air Force One is not like every other Boeing, and it's going to have to be put through a lot of paces and probably every square inch analyzed before I think the President should consider it his primary means of transportation.
And literally just days ago, Republican Senator Ted Cruz from Texas accused Qatar of supporting left-wing extremism in the U.S.
Follow the money. How much of Antifa is paid for by Qatar? How much of it is paid for by Iran? How much of it is paid for by communist China?
But no matter how the consensus view in the United States on Qatar continues to change, Trump's executive order does three things. It pulls the U.S. further into the gravity well of foreign conflict. It makes clear the White House's allegiance in these conflicts, at least for as long as Trump says it is so. And it sends the wider world a powerful signal, and that is, don't mess with the U.S. or its friends.